You're listening to a RALIANCE podcast, conversations and insights about our efforts to end sexual violence in one generation.
Nice.
She could have made you happy for a little while.
There's only one thing that'll make me happy.
And what's that?
That's my fucking business. Used to be you couldn't look at me.
That was a long time ago. I've seen much worse than you since then.
Yes, I've heard. Had you were broken in. Had you were broken in rough.
And he got what he deserved. I gave it to him.
Oh.
Hounds.
You've changed, little bird. None of it would have happened if you left King's Landing with me. No Littlefinger. No Ramsay. None of it.
Without Littlefinger and Ramsay and the rest, I would have stayed a little bird all my life.
Hi, this is Brian Pinero, and I'm here with Ebony Tucker, and we are with RALIANCE. We are going to talk a little bit about Game of Thrones today, just have a real casual conversation and talk about some of the things that we've seen, I think, in last week, specifically around the discussion between the Hound and Sansa about the sexual assault that had happened to her. I think, was it season 4?
Season 5, I think.
Season 5.
Mm-hmm. So I think I almost missed Sansa's response because I was so surprised by what the Hound said. I think that, most of what I've been reading in the last, or today at least, since the episode aired, has been about, Sansa's sort of take on having been a victim of sexual assault and how that's changed her life. When really, I think I was surprised that the Hound was allowed, at least in the way the show was written, to ask her a question or to make a statement that really showed that she was the cause of her own victimization. Yeah. So it was a super victim blaming statement and really inappropriate, which put her in a position, I think, to defend her decision and then also to say, these are the ways that I've changed and become a different person. I think the issue is that a lot of people who have been assaulted might say, these are ways in which my experience has changed me. Yeah. I don't think it's really appropriate on a show like Game of Thrones that doesn't show victimization in a responsible light at all to say to someone, I've become a better leader and possibly someone who could sit on the Iron Throne because I was raped and tortured by my crazy ass husband. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, and also just the, how do you have a serious conversation with somebody who basically just brings it up and just hey, so I heard about that thing.
Right.
How is she supposed to, how are you supposed to answer that?
Right. I mean, how is she supposed to say that, or how is she supposed to respond to the fact that, well, you made this decision. If you had come with me a long time ago, this man that you were obviously very afraid of, who was so harsh in the way that he acted, the way he spoke, that he would say something like, I heard he brought you in rough, which was a terrible way to describe her victimization. So it totally made sense that Sansa didn't want to come with him, but she's now being blamed for that decision.
But don't you also think, I think this goes along with a lot of stuff that we've seen. It's just the necessity. We know the arc of her character and where everything has gone. And even I think when the Hound was talking about, you've certainly changed, little bird.
Right.
I think you could have done all the same stuff and gotten to the same, we all did, you haven't gotten to season 8 and you haven't remembered this stuff, right? You remember
exactly.
And it's almost it goes back to, and we were doing research for this, one of the things that an audience member asked about the sexual assaults, and they were talking about it's just we're just really trying to capture what the character, like, there's not a good reason to put it in there. And it's almost like this is just, you don't have to go back to something horrible like that to be able to talk about how someone became stronger, when you could have just remembered that Sansa was the girl who left with her father to go to the capital, and we knew the type of person she was, and we also know what happened over the last 7 seasons. I think that's the part where it's that he, just having him say that, we know he's rough and gruff, but it's also it's one of the things where you're also sending a message too, and it's not related to the story.
Right. No, I think you bring up a really good point, which I'm glad you said that, because I think that, the show has done a good enough job over time showing us the way that these characters have evolved. I think if there's one thing you could say in the plus column for Game of Thrones, it's that character development has been there. We didn't need that to be restated, and for the show, I think, to make an excuse for why the rape ever existed. I think they felt a little defensive and wanted to have Sansa say, well, all of these things were necessary to get me to this point. But I think the truth is that living in the world that they live in for the last 7 or 8 years is what's gotten Sansa to this point. I don't think that the significant physical and emotional abuse that she suffered was necessary to make her someone who could be a queen. But I do think they have a history of doing that with female characters, definitely.
So part of me was like trying to figure this out too, is it just, is there a place for sexual violence in Game of Thrones? Because I think that's one of the things I think we both talked about. And we can get to when we're going to talk about the Ramsay rape of Sansa. We can talk about that, but I think before, like, is it necessary? And I think that's where I come back to, because I think about how I would have looked at this before I think I got into the work of anti-partner violence. And I think part of it has just been like, hey man, it's just, it's medieval times, or it's whatever, or it's a story, or stop taking it. But I think like it's, and there's also all these other things I think that exist. It's just like, well, you don't have a problem watching someone get their throat slit open, but like this causes, but I think it's also part of like what's happening, I think, in the country right now. I think we also know a lot more. If you murder somebody, like for the most part, if you get arrested for murder, you're probably being prosecuted and you're probably going to jail for murder, right? If you get arrested for like burning children, you're going to go to jail if you get caught. But with rape, we know that even if you get accused of rape, it doesn't necessarily mean. We still put it in those such like, did she do it? Did she bring on herself? I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe there's a better way to do this that they chose not to, but should they have even done it at all is the thing I guess I struggle with.
What I thought is that their most irresponsible moment was not the rape of Sansa. I think they thought probably that they were doing this a bit more responsibly. I could be wrong about that, but I actually think they did. Which is why they took care to not show Ramsay during the actual rape. But I think that for us, it was the straw that broke the camel's back.
But is it also that they just had enough sense to know that would have been too much to show us that?
I think so.
Like, I think maybe when
they knew their brutality had to stop. And I think this is what happens when uninformed people try to take on a subject when they mean well, but don't know what the hell they're talking about. And that's what happened, is that they meant well, so they wanted to do it in a way that was more sensitive, and they did not handle it well at all.
I still think we're in a time when people still don't quite believe that sexual assault happens in the way. And so there's a lot of people, too, who are just like, it's just whatever. It's just a story. Like, no, it's not. It's huge. It continues to play into a narrative that we have.
I agree. I mean, I think where we are now is that people know how they're supposed to answer and what they're supposed to think about the issue generally. So rape is bad. Rape is wrong.
Right.
That doesn't mean that everyone is on the same page and that people are able to respond with that same level of appropriateness for individual cases. And that's what we see all the time. Mm-hmm. The horrible treatment of Dr. Ford, the complaining about Me Too, when, Tarana Burke has been such a great instrument in this movement, but saying things like, oh, God, another one. I mean, this is getting ridiculous now.
Right. Like the doors are just open and everybody's coming through.
Right. And so I think that what we have is a situation where even if people understand as a concept rape is bad, that doesn't mean they respond well to people who have been raped. And that's a lot of the issue with treating rape in such a flippant manner on this show. Because when it comes to, I mean, I think that was a perfect analogy, because when it comes to murder, we don't have those same lines of moral ambiguity. We're not in a situation where we question or we think or we're like, oh, well, it was a long time ago. Or, we don't have all of those excuses. It is, this is bad. You have done this wrong thing. It is punishable. So I had never thought about that before, but I do think that you're right. Like, that's a way that it's easier to highlight murder as a form of violence because we never question whether or not that's right or wrong.